So another story they never told you in VBS. I'm sure they told you lots of stories about Abraham and Sarah or Abram and Sarai, which is actually how they show up in our text today. But I'm pretty sure in VBS they never told you this one. And actually, this is just one version, the first instance of a story that shows up three times. This is Genesis 12:10 through 19. And it's about Abraham's sojourn in Egypt, which, interestingly enough, the whole story kind of parallels the story of Israel in Egypt. Lots of very similar language going on here. If you look at that whole story, not just like the book of Exodus, but the whole story beginning with Joseph going into Egypt and then Moses leading the people out of Egypt. Lots of really similar language going on here, which is there's probably a point for that. But it parallels the story of Joseph and Moses, the entrance of Israel into Egypt, and their exit from there. So but here, Abraham, once he flees into Egypt to escape a famine because there's lots of famine in the land. Sounds familiar, right? But there's a problem. So and keep in mind too, Abram has just been introduced to us in this story. This is very soon after the whole story of Noah. A few weeks ago we looked at Noah and Ham and um, his other Shep and Curly. Anyway, but this is right really soon after that, and this is we were introduced to Abram as a descendant of Shem. Yeah, right. Yeah, Shem, and then now the story picks up with him because he is the patriarch of Israel, and God has already told him like, hey, you know, leave your fathers and your father's land and all his gods and follow me and go where I tell you to, and I will bless you, and those who bless you I will bless, and those who curse you I will curse. So God's made this huge promise to him, and Abram has followed him, with his nephew Lot in tow. He's got his wife Sarah, but it's interesting. This kind of sets the stage for something we will see throughout Abram's story where he doesn't quite trust God. And that's what goes on here. He flees into Egypt to escape the famine. But there's this problem because, he's got this wife, Sarah, or Sarai, and apparently, she's a hottie, yea, verily, an ancient Bronze Age stone cold fox, I guess. But he says, hey, I know you're really attractive. And like, if we get into town here in Egypt, Pharaoh is going to know you're really attractive and he's going to want you for himself. And then he's going to kill me. So, maybe you should just, keep the husband and wife thing on the down low. Just tell people you're my sister. Um, and she's like, well, okay. Now here's the thing: you got to remember, we're told that he's like 75 when they go into Egypt, and she's only a year younger than him. She's like 74. So I mean, hey, good genes. But anyway, um, that's what goes on. Abram uh, gets her to agree to this. They get into the land, and we're told that that Pharaoh's princes. That doesn't necessarily mean his like sons and stuff. I don't think it could just mean like the other people in his hierarchy, the people that answer him. They all see her and they report back to Pharaoh, and they're like, yeah, she's a hottie. And Pharaoh's like, gotta have her for my wife, and does what pharaohs do, right? So he takes her into his household and then um, pays Abram for her, and Abram accepts it. It's like, I guess, like a dowry or like a bride price. He gives him like herds and flocks of sheep and goats and all this stuff. And we're told Abram does really well for himself, like, because he's told Sarah, he said, you should just lie about who you are for my sake. Doesn't seem to be a lot of concern for what this might mean for Sarai. So I think that's one of the things that kind of weirds me out about this. Abram is really weird about what Pharaoh might do to him, but not terribly concerned, it seems like, with what Pharaoh might do to Sarai. So anyway, um, that's where we get to. Yeah. So yeah. Oh, he lies. Yeah, she's my sister. And it's not like this was just told in passing and then he just acted on it and they never had a chance to discuss this. I'm pretty sure that there were multiple meetings as, things like bride price were negotiated, things like that. There just have to have been. It doesn't tell us that in the text, but I'm just assuming from other stuff I've read that's how it would have worked. So, like I said, Abram benefited from that. He became rich with all the flocks and the herds gifted to him on Sarai's account. Um, but here's the deal. Remember, I said, like, God has made this promise to Abram: I will take care of you. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. In other words, people who want good for you, I will do good for them, and people who want evil for you, I will do evil to them. And Abram won't be honest about his wife because he's scared for his own life. Sarai doesn't stand up for herself. God is the one who finally intercedes with Pharaoh and stops this whole thing cold. We're told that he just strikes Pharaoh and Egypt with many plagues. Sounds familiar, right? Um, so so that's what happens. And this Pharaoh is pretty quick on the uptake, and he's like, yo, there's something sketch here. And susses the whole thing out, and like Abram gets cornered, and he's like, hey, why did you lie to me? Why didn't you tell me this is not your sister or just your sister? They probably weren't related like that. Why didn't you tell me this is your wife? I could have died. Your God does not like stuff like this. Why do you hate me? What is it? And long story short, he just tells Abram and Sarah, he's like, take your wife, take all the stuff I gave you, just get out of my country. And gives his men directions regarding this. One translation just flat out says, sent him out of the country under armed guard, which is, I guess, kind of the intent here. And the weird thing is, like I said, this isn't just one incident, it's a one-off thing. A couple of chapters later, after the whole story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and right before Isaac's born, Abram, we're told, does the whole thing again with the king Abimelech. And it makes me wonder, like, were they like, hey, we should do the Sister Sarah con again, and maybe we'll get some more flocks out of this guy. And then it happens again with, like, Isaac does it. Like, so apparently this is, like, hey, this is something they do. So anyway, what's the deal with this? What's the takeaway for this? I think the takeaway is I take it as this is kind of a character issue that we have in Abram. He trusts God, right? I mean, you can't undercut the fact that he did what God asked him. He walked away from his family's home. He walked away from his father. He walked away from all that into an unknown land. Not like it was like didn't know anything about this land. It just wasn't his home. And God, like Paul says, counted to him as righteousness. But there's always this underlying trust issue between Abram, later Abraham, and God. Like, he and Sarah are always trying to, like, they'll take God at his word, but then they're always kind of trying to help things along. So, like, God said, hey, I'll protect you. And Abram's like, sweet, great, awesome. I'm going to work behind the scenes to make sure I don't get killed, though. So, yeah, he trusts God, but not all the way, and then just kind of does some things that God probably wouldn't have had him do, or wanted him to do, or told him to do if Abram had talked to him first. I wonder what the story would have been like if Abram had been like, God, I know I need to go to Egypt to get away from the famine, but I'm really scared of Pharaoh. What God would have said to him. Or if he had said, God, I'm really worried about this famine, if God would have said, hey, I've got another option. But see, that's the thing with stuff like this when we don't really trust. It's not that God didn't have good planned for Abram or didn't make good happen out of this. I mean, Abram got rich off of it. God probably would have preferred he picked another method, but it's not that good didn't come of it. It's that there was probably a good that God intended that Abram and Sarai never got to enjoy because they took things into their own hands. You have C.S. Lewis to thank for that little kernel of wisdom. Anyway, that's not the DBR for today. That is the VBS for today. Another story they never taught you in VBS. See you later.